It's Dave and Bill, and we're wanting to talk a little bit more about legislation today. I know there's been a lot of people who have been emailing in and calling about what's going on at the General Assembly, and we're here to keep you up to date on those things. Uh, but we're in day 3 that the General Assembly started. Now the flurry of bills are being introduced. We're trying to keep up each day on which bills are being introduced and which bills directly affect you as a member of the Virginia State Police Association. Yesterday we were presented the bill that was introduced. House Bill 1263 was introduced by Delegate Tran, and David, this bill presents a lot of problems.
It does. I think that we should start with what's included. As far as House Bill 1263 is concerned, all of law enforcement is going to be included. That's all law enforcement defined under Title 9.1, Section 101. That would include sheriffs and all of the law enforcement throughout Virginia would be included in the bill. In House Bill 1263, supervisors are also included. And there is a delineation between the supervisors. It's supervisors who can bargain and management who cannot bargain. The way that the bill is defined with respect to the supervisors is curious because its application is going to be questionable as to the state police. And as far as management's concerned, my take on the bill, the read on the bill, is that management would probably include captain and above, who would not be eligible to collectively bargain. And then the other supervisors would be able to bargain, but it has to be in a separate unit.
Which is a clear difference than what it was last year, and I think that came about because of our advocacy to be taken out of it, and then there were supervisors that realized that they wouldn't even be in the collective bargaining process of it.
Sure enough. And so we have that set up. It's all inclusive. And then as far as the bargaining units, the way that the bargaining units are defined in the bill would include a law enforcement bargaining unit and then a separate bargaining unit. Now, when we first took a look at the bill and we read it, we were a little unsure because the language in the bill as it was introduced is that it's all law enforcement in a bargaining unit except for the highway patrol. And so when we saw that, of course, our reaction, you and I both, was that we didn't know what the highway patrol was. We didn't know what that meant. But we did get a chance to hear from Delegate Tran's office and get an understanding of what highway patrol meant in this context. And it was meant to signify the state police. So there would be a separate bargaining unit for the state police, those people who can bargain, which would be all the troopers, the agents, and potentially everybody up through lieutenant. Of course, 2 separate bargaining units would exist. However, that language is going to have to be changed in order for the bill to move forward.
And I responded back to her this morning to explain to her that we're not considered highway patrol. In states where there is highway patrol, there's a distinct difference between the patrol and the troopers on the road and the Bureau of Criminal Investigations. Moving forward with that language, it'll have to be defined in the code. And as they define that in the code, they could see themselves separating the agency, one being a Bureau of Operations just for uniform, and then a Bureau of Criminal Investigations. And under this language, it appears that if they do go that route, then BCI would be defined under law enforcement. So they wouldn't even be part of that separate highway patrol language that would be in there. Now keep in mind that there's a lot of problems by redefinition. One being that there could be the separation of the agency. 2 being that under the current code, you are in your own retirement system. It's known as the State Police Officers Retirement, SPORS. You're the only agency under that. And if that changes, that definition changes, then they have to change the definition of SPORS also,
And who would be eligible?
and who would be eligible for that. So you could conceivably see SPORS for all the people who are active today go under LEO's, Law Enforcement Officers Retirement System. So you wouldn't be separated at all from sheriff's deputies. And the other thing that I was thinking about as we were looking over this and digesting it last night is most sheriff's departments in Virginia today have patrol units within their department. So highway patrol could apply to them also.
Yes.
So there's a lot of issues at stake in this, and you know there's still more, but this is one that we want to point out to you that's very specific. Now our meeting with her earlier this year was that we wanted to be taken out of this, but we did explain to her that, you know, we're a separate entity, we're more complex, and we don't feel like we should be inclusive into all law enforcement. So she took that as to changing it and taking us out of all law enforcement, but she did it in a different way.
Yes.
We're still not supportive of the bill either way, but we realize that she's trying to use our conversation to separate the two, but do it in a different fashion.
That's correct, Bill. And there are other problems, many of which that we discussed with her, and she attempted to correct within the bill in the context of collective bargaining, discipline being one of those. And that's a big deal when it comes to collective bargaining, because the scope of the collective bargaining will be wages, benefits, and all other working conditions, which is pretty much, you could drive a truck through that in terms of what it covers. Discipline is one of those areas within collective bargaining and unionization that has caused serious problems in law enforcement throughout the nation. One of the ways that she attempted to control this issue within the bill is to allow the Law Enforcement Officers Procedural Guarantee Act to remain unchanged. So all the rights and privileges that fall under the LEO-PGA will remain.
Which sounds good on the surface, but as you get down,
It does, with a big caveat
Yes.
with respect to that. Decertification authority is untouched, so that will remain with DCGS, and the union cannot be involved in decertification proceedings. DCGS standards likewise cannot be negotiated or changed. In fact, law can't be superseded in any way by the collective bargaining as it's drafted under House Bill 1263. Unions are also excluded from serious misconduct investigations. So we have a serious misconduct regulation within DCGS, established by DCGS. And that regulation, for any offenses that are investigated by an agency, the collective bargaining agent through the union lawyers cannot be involved in that process. According to the bill, disciplinary authority still remains with with management, and as I mentioned, you can't override any statute or regulation. The big caveat that I discussed with respect to discipline, however, is that grievances go to the union. And so what this means is that if you have a grievance, your lawyer has to be the union lawyer. All of that is controlled within the union. And so that applies if you're a member or a non-member. It does not matter. So the difference is, if you're a non-member and you're not paying your dues and you have a grievance, you want to take it up with the agency, you can hire a lawyer to represent you. However, you got to pay that lawyer the prevailing rate. Whatever that lawyer is going to charge you, would charge you in a normal instance, that's what you're going to pay as a non-member. Of course, that is contingent upon additional
And it's
legislation.
gonna be a, union lawyer. It's not
That's
gonna
correct.
be you.
That is correct. Or it cannot be an outside lawyer. It's got to be the
Right.
union's lawyer. And so, when it comes to that is contingent upon additional legislation. So, Senator Carafoy has a bill to repeal right to work. Within the right to work statute, there's an additional provision that says that you can't be forced as a condition of your employment to belong to the union. If that's repealed, then of course everybody will be forced to pay dues. Everybody will be forced to be a member of the union. And of course, your only option again, because the legislation dictates so, is that you get the union lawyer if you've got a grievance.
And it can dictate, new hires, whether they can be hired if they are not willing to be a part of the union. There's a lot of things that could really go bad if the right to work law is repealed.
Mm-hmm.
With all this that's within this bill, those two happen together, it's really going to be a lot. And that's their goal, is actually to push in that direction.
Yes. And then there's the remaining question: is, what are the union dues going to look like? We don't know. We have no idea. The bill doesn't state what the union dues will be. It's going to be up to the union as to what they charge for the services that they provide.
We do know what they, routinely charge in other areas where these are, established, is about 1 to 2%, mainly 2% of the salary of the individual. So those are going to be extremely high.
Mm-hmm. Very costly.
Very costly. And to get back to costly, we haven't seen the fiscal impact on this yet. This is going to be very costly to the state to set up this structure. If they leave Highway Patrol and they redefine the agency and separate the two, that's going to be an additional cost to the state to reestablish the state police as a highway patrol and to reestablish a criminal investigation branch of a bureau. So there's going to be other costs associated to that. And now to get into the pure politics of everything is the lack of the want, I guess, from legislators to understand our agency. They're listening to an outside entity to basically determine what our agency does. And they're not listening to the people, the experts within the agency, to understand the dynamics of what we do. And that's where this is important for us to have you, to enlist you, to call your legislator, to let your legislator know that you don't want to be in this bill and that you don't approve of collective bargaining within the state police or want to be separated as a highway patrol. If you don't call, then they don't listen. The problem today is with the new General Assembly, 59 out of the 100 in the House have only served for 4 years. So they really don't have an understanding of all the state agencies. We try to educate them at the best we can, but their focus is more on what their constituents says and not what us, the association as a lobbying group, say to them. So it's very important today. We're asking for you, number one, to call your legislator. Number two, write an email or call Delegate Tran's office and say to them, we're not a highway patrol. We're a state police unit. And we're much more complex than a highway patrol, and that we don't want to be defined as highway patrol, and that we don't want to be a part of a union. Those things are very important, because in politics, if you don't hear from the people that you represent, it will go on deaf ears, and they're listening to an outside entity.
Mm-hmm. You bring up a couple of really interesting points, Bill, in terms of the money. We don't know what the bill is going to cost. We don't know what collective bargaining is going to cost. We do not know what the union dues will cost. That's an important factor when it comes to understanding how this thing will work. If the legislation's passed and we're forced into collective bargaining as an agency or as a Commonwealth, the costs are going to be there. And particularly if they repeal the right to work, then everybody's got to pay the union dues. Now, it's important maybe to remind our viewers that the way that would work if it's implemented. So the bargaining unit would negotiate a contract, and they can negotiate wages, benefits, or any other working conditions with the agency, with the management. And then that contract goes to the General Assembly. And share with the viewers what the processes would look like once that contract goes to the General Assembly.
So the way that this is structured is much like what they're right now trying to repeal this independent council for redistricting. They pushed for years to have an independent redistricting panel. And basically what that panel would do was draw the districts for elected offices. And now they don't agree with that. So they're introduced, and they have passed a new constitutional amendment that will come up in April that will do away with this independent council, because what happened was it backfired on them. The independent council drew the districts not of their liking, knowing that all this has to go back to them, the General Assembly, to vote on. Well, in this incident, because they're required to redraw the districts, it was sent to the courts, and the courts drew the districts, and they had no vote. So it's all political. And in this incident, with a union bargaining agent that goes before this 5-member panel that'll be established to bargain whatever it is wage-wise that they want to bargain for you, that bargaining panel will say, if it's 5% that you're asking for, well, we only think you should get 3, so we'll agree on 3%. Then that panel will send it, they can't appropriate money, send it to the General Assembly, and the General Assembly will say, well, we can't afford 3%, we're not going to give them 3%, so you get nothing. Or we can't afford 3, we'll give them 1, and you'll get 1, and the union will get most of it. But the bottom line is, the whole essence of doing this way is to keep you from being able to talk to your elected official. So from this point forward, when you call your elected official, they're going to tell you to talk to your union rep, not to talk to them, that they will only vote on whatever was sent to them by that 5-member panel. So your voice is muffled. Yet when it comes election time, they're going to ask that union group to say, your guys need to get in line and support us and elect us. And it's all about power. It's all about power.
And if you're a non-union member, they just won't talk to you altogether.
Yeah, they don't talk to you at all. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is, when I talk about power, it's about securing power for the future. Mm-hmm. Because every state that we know of that has implemented collective bargaining, it's impossible just about to get out of it. So if our agency goes in it, trying to get out of it's going to be virtually impossible.
Mm-hmm. And it all comes down to the money, both in terms of what the legislature can afford, because it goes beyond wages. It's going to be the cost of benefits, or those other working conditions that could relate to cost. And when it comes down to it, it also means money for the politicians, because there's going to be a cycle of political contributions that support
that you're
the collective bargaining system.
That you're paying in with your salary.
And that's the very reason that they want to repeal the provision of right to work that says that you could be forced to be a member of the union and to pay union dues.
It is so non-transparent. We hear this yelled and screamed by the parties that government needs to be more transparent. We hear it on a federal level, we hear it all the time on a state level, but there is zero transparency in this process.
Yeah, the entire contracting process is protected.
Exactly. So we're encouraging you. This is one of the most important things that we have found. There's a lot of other important thing, but this one, we feel is something that you have got to get engaged on, and that you have got to share this video with your colleagues, share it with the general public, with your neighbors, with your family, and tell them, look, you need to be calling your legislator and saying, we need for you to oppose this collective bargaining bill.
Reach out and speak up, and thanks for viewing.
Thank you.